Hello and welcome back to ADHD Mums. In this podcast, we tackle the tough, often unspoken realities of motherhood, neurodiversity and mental health. Hello and welcome to ADHD Mums. Today we continue on with the mini-series on school and we welcome back Millie Carr. How are you, Millie?
I'm really good. Thanks for having me back, Jane.
We are not going to go back into who Millie is. I am trusting that everybody's listened to the first episode of the mini-series. If you haven't, go back. It will be into the show notes, or you can check out Millie in the show notes on her website. The theme for today's episode is burnout starts in the classroom and follows them home. And we welcome Millie, who has a wealth of experience in the area of burnout. To start off with, Millie, what do you think is the difference between academic fatigue and neurodivergent burnout?
Yeah, so academic fatigue is just really, it's tiredness from normal school effort, and normal school effort for neurotypical people isn't 100%. Normal school effort is they go, they do their work, they're a little bit tired, maybe they put a bit of extra effort in that day, they had a big event maybe on and they're a little bit tired over a course of the term has been quite big. That's just general fatigue of things that are happening. Burnout, on the difference, it's chronic. It's physical. You can see it in their bodies, in their reactions, in their nervous systems. And it's something that, if it's not tackled and we don't kind of address it, it just gets worse and worse and worse. So the burnout signs that you might see would be completely shutting down, potentially withdrawing from things that they enjoy doing, just literally having no effort to even come out and have a chat or talk to you. Yeah. So the difference between neurodivergent students, we tend to give that 100% often and ongoing, and it gets to a point where we just can't give that anymore, and it's just completely burnt out, and they just cannot, and it might lead to school refusal and all those kind of things as well. You can really see it in those students.
I love that. And I think a lot of the mums on this podcast, if they have ADHD or they're neurodivergent, they would have an understanding of how burnout actually feels and looks. And I think when you've felt that, you've seen it, you can actually read the signs quite easily. So it might be a good idea, if you're a listener and you're a mum, to actually think about periods of burnout that you've experienced, how that's looked for you. And then have a look at your child and whether that's, again, like you said, term fatigue, academic fatigue versus burnout. If we were to look at a typical school day, we know that neurodivergent children are more likely to experience burnout, as neurodivergent people are more likely to experience burnout. What would be the number of decisions a neurodivergent child would have to make compared to a neurotypical child? Like, how is it different?
If you can imagine, you get to school, firstly, you might be already anxious. So you're already thinking about what the school day is going to be like. Is my teacher going to be away? Who am I going to play with at recess and lunch? That's before you even kind of got to the door. You get to the door, you've opened the door, you come in, and then you got to decide, okay, I've got to get this, my pencil case, my ruler, my laptop, my this out of my bag, I can get that sorted on my table, and then grab my book. There, you've already had a multitude of different executive functioning decisions. Then you sit down, and then the teacher's giving you instructions, but potentially they don't have a visual to support that instruction. So they're just verbally saying it. So you have to decipher what kind of communication, and maybe verbal communication isn't the one that you prefer the best. So you have to decipher that. You come down to the floor, then everyone's in a circle. You're asked to respond to a question. You have to think of the answer on the spot. That can cause a bit of anxiety. We're only like 40 minutes in at this point. Do you mean? And that's before we've even got things like maybe a task is really hard and we're not really, they don't know how to complete the task. Maybe then they go outside and then it's trying to navigate who I play with. Maybe there's a fight happening within my friendship group and I've got to navigate what to do there and what to say. There's so much input. The classroom might be a fabulous teacher that has a million things all over the place in the classroom. All of that information, like where do I look? What do I do? Sounds are happening. So much stuff is going on throughout the day. You're taking in so much information, and our nervous systems for neurodivergent people and students are just much more sensitive to all of those things. We are so sensitive to having all of this input and not having a place to kind of like, especially if teachers aren't building in places where we can regulate and bring ourselves back down. That's where we find a lot of students are kind of like, yeah. And that every day, if you're dealing with that every single day, you can deal with that for a little bit. Even a neurodivergent student can deal with that for a little bit. But as it goes on and on and on and on and on, that's where you're leading to the burnout. That's where the perfectionism can't happen anymore. That's where they just stop. And everyone's just like, oh, it's kind of happened out of nowhere. But it's progressively been building and building and building. And that would be a typical, like I said, I only mentioned like probably an eighth of the stuff that kids are facing when they're at school. There's way more to it, but I would be going into an entire day and a time log. So that's just an idea of some of the stuff that they're trying to think about all day.
Yeah, this is why I think in some respects, being a neurodivergent child or teen is a lot harder than being an adult, because you have an understanding of yourself. You go, I don't like that job. There's something about it I don't like. You may not know it's sensory.
Right.
You may not know what the problem is, but you can leave if you'd like. And a lot of us bounce around careers. However, if you've got a parent that's picked that school and the child can't articulate what the actual issue is, it can go on and on and on. And the child is told by the parent or the teacher, whatever it is, if you're having trouble, just try harder. But when we're telling a child to try harder, is that a possible demand? Is that impossible? Like, how is that going to work for a child?
Like you said, Jane, they don't know what's actually causing the nervous system overload. Like they actually don't know, because they don't realize that all of the posters that are on the wall potentially could be causing some of the issues that they're having. They don't realize that others aren't giving 110% for every task they're doing. They don't realize these things. So they're definitely not going to be able to articulate it to their parents. And like you said, we as adults, we can build systems in place to kind of help us with some of these things. The environment at school is not built for them. It's built from the absolute get-go to support students that like to sit down, that kind of follow that kind of very loud, noisy environment. They're not built for neurodivergent students a lot of the time. And I think telling students to just try harder or just do it is just like trying to tell a student that has glasses, just take your glasses off and look at the board. There's the board. I don't know why you can't read like everybody else. Just try harder. It's impossible because it's a function of their disability. Someone who can't see wears glasses so that they can see. Students that are neurodivergent and have trouble with executive functioning, have trouble with completing the tasks, with social cues, with all of the things that are not even like problems for them unless we had this environment we built that makes it a problem. These things, if they're told to just, if you just tried hard enough, they'd actually be able to sit there and do the task. Well, they can't do a 20-minute task and focus on it without being broken up into steps and giving them chunks. And if you haven't done that as a teacher for them, they are going to struggle and sit there and stare into space. And then they're going to be in trouble for this, which is not really their fault.
You can just see the same flavour to the same recipe for when I talk to neurodivergent, late diagnosed women with just try harder. I'm shit at life. I don't have very good self-esteem. I can't do what everyone else does. What's wrong with me? You can just see the foundations built early when you talk. You really can. What about interoception differences? How can that make it harder for neurodivergent children to know when they're about to crash? Or maybe what is interoception? Maybe some people don't know what that is either.
Yeah, because interoception is being able to read and understand your own cues and your own body and your own emotions. And a lot of the time, neurodivergent students, they kind of only can tell when it's happening. So it almost appears that it goes from like 0 to 100, but there's little subtle signs that they're missing. So potentially they're fidgeting a little bit more. Maybe they're moving around a little bit more because they're starting to get agitated. Potentially they're sweating a little bit. Their brain is not able to actually concentrate on what someone's speaking about. There's all these little kind of body cues that are happening inside us that we need to pay attention to know that we're getting to that point before we explode. And if we keep adding and adding and adding and adding, then obviously the explosion happens. So the thing that I like to teach and talk to the teachers that I work with, we do a bit of a sheet where we look at the behavior that kind of is really explosive potentially, or the behavior that happens that interrupts the classroom and all these big things that we're seeing. I always like the teacher to think about what happened prior to it. What are some things that you see, and to really pay attention for the next week to that student, or even someone like I would come in and watch that student while the teacher's teaching and kind of look at like pinpoint where it started to happen. Last year, I worked with a teacher who at the start of the year, I was going into the classroom pretty much every day. They were calling me and like there were explosions were happening, chairs were being pushed, tables were being, like people were going outside the classroom to be safe. It was very stressful for the whole first term. Once I did that with the student and the teacher, and we pinpointed, you could really tell for him what was happening. So on the floor, when he was sitting down on the floor, all of a sudden you could see that what he started to do is he started to twitch and get a little bit agitated. He had his book in front of him. He started to write a little bit more notes, and you could tell he started to get a bit stressed because he didn't understand what was going on with the instructions. So he needed the instructions a bit more clearer for him. So you could tell, you could pick up that first little sign there. And then if you picked it up at that point and you got him at that point, we were able to mitigate the massive big explosion that kind of happened. Because once you get to the explosion, there's so many different points where it can reignite again. So if you can catch it like before that, that little kind of curve of the explosion happening, if you can catch it in the middle here, it makes a massive difference in being able to really teach teachers how to find it first. And then you start teaching the students how to do that. So did you notice that when you were getting a bit upset at the instructions on the floor, your body started to get a little bit tense and you were wiggling around a little bit? And then often they're, oh, yeah, I do that a lot, actually. That happens when, and then they start to go, oh, these are my cues. These are my traits that kind of come up when I'm starting to feel a certain way that leads to generally an explosion. And they want to stop it as well. They don't want to get to the point where they're out of control in the classroom. It's traumatic for them to be like that in the classroom. So if we can try and catch those little cues beforehand, helps a lot. And then we can teach the students how to be interoceptive themselves.
Oh, I love that. Is it Dr. Ross Green? He says kids do well if they can.
Yeah.
They just can't. They're not necessarily set up correctly. Okay, speaking about that, that is a great segue into the next question. So what would be some of the accommodations that reduce burnout, and which ones are performative and which ones are not?
There's so many different things, and really easy things though too. Like these are things that you can suggest to your teacher that are not going to cause them a whole lot of extra work and can be done for everybody, because everyone benefits from some of these accommodations, not just neurodivergent students too. So some things: allowing flexible seating, not having students have to sit on the floor with their legs crossed. I tell you, that one's a massive one, because some kids, even for me as an adult, if I was told to sit down on the floor and cross my legs, I'm going to be focusing on the pain that's causing me rather than actually focusing on the learning. So flexible seating, allowing students to stand, maybe walk around, sit down if they want on the floor, sit on a chair, sit the way they want so that they're comfortable. Visuals are a massive one, and that helps with executive functioning as well, having visuals. If you're talking to students, you have to have something, even just an anchor, even if it's just like a little picture or a word or something that they can anchor that verbal information you're giving them with a visual. And then they can even keep it up later on. So you could make an anchor chart with the students as you're talking, leave it up, because a lot of students with neurodivergence struggle to pay attention or forget the information that's happened. They can go back and check in it later and know that that resource is there. Having structure and predictability to your day is really important. Changes and slight changes to the day that they're not expecting can send students' nervous systems into like complete black flight. They're just like, what is going on? I don't know what to do. So that's another one that can really help. And then also being really flexible on how you provide information, but allow students to respond to information. So not every student is going to be able to write a 2-page response to the question that you've asked them. Some students prefer that. Some students would like to draw a picture, make a video. They're a bit more creative. You've got to allow for different kind of learning styles and learning and ways they express those as well. If you don't do that and you keep it to everyone has to do this and it's all the very same, you end up having students not be able to, forcing themselves to do this. And they're the things that gradually build up and cause the burnout. I've just suggested 4 different things there. If you were to just change those 4 different things, it would calm down a nervous system of a neurodivergent student like very quickly. And imagine that if you go over weeks, months, years, if the environment is set up with some of these kind of, I guess, things. Yeah, there's just a few suggestions.
I think that's a great point, because then you've got the chronic invalidation that comes with that. Like, what do you mean there was a small change? You'll be fine. And it's like, then you're not actually allowing them to understand and acknowledge that maybe changing teacher and having a relief teacher is really tricky. For mums at home, let's say you have a child that you think is more likely to be burnout than another child. And you're thinking, oh, I feel like I'm constantly on this burnout cycle with this child, in and out. I'm trying to calm them. It's like a constant battle to get through the year. What would be some things we could do at home as mums to try and reduce the likelihood of the burnout happening?
Yeah, the first thing is obviously the communication with school, and then they can sort out some things at school. And then for you at home, you can do a lot of these things at home too. So a lot of these similar kind of suggestions that I'm telling you are things that you can do at home, because even if the teacher at school is doing all of these accommodations and the environment set up, it's really neurodiversity and affirming for those students, and it's reducing a lot of their stress and nervous system kind of pressure. When you come home, if your environment, and it's very hard for us as parents, though, that are neurodivergent ourselves, it's the hardest thing for us as neurodivergent parents to put some structure in place. I know that for my son on the holidays, if I let everything just go all over the place and we don't keep a bit of a routine in place for him, like just making his lunch still, like him making his lunch and doing that job and then writing down for him, we're going to do this and then we'll do this today and then we're going to finish with this at the end of the day. Just even talking about it, depending on what kind of communication style your child prefers. I think some of these examples fit at home. Some of these accommodations work for home. Some of the kids need some visuals. Maybe if you're having some trouble at home with some transitions and stuff like that, you might want to do a little bit of a social story. They're really good to get students just to understand, oh, okay, that's what it stops them stressing about what's going to happen, what's coming, where we're going and what am I going to see? Because all of that kind of I don't know and that unaware of what it is, that can build up to then cause the burnout. For the students that I was speaking about earlier, in terms of the students that kind of go 100% or 110%, perfectionist kids that go all the time, I would really keep on those kids from doing too much at home. Some of those kids go home and do homework for hours and hours because they feel they need to. I would put a bit of a limit on it and make sure there's some time built in where there's family time, games, fun, joy. Find something that they enjoy doing that's not pressure, not a non-pressure activity that doesn't mean they have to perform or do amazing at it. So build those things into your nighttime and weekend routines where they're coming away from that perfectionist thing, and constantly talk to them about the fact that you've got to trying your hardest isn't giving 100%. Trying your hardest is just some days we're going to have more or less capacity on that day, and stopping them and pulling them back. It's something that, you have to monitor at home, so that if we're doing it at school and at home, that's going to make a massive, massive difference for them. And hopefully, like adults with burnout, we have to build some of those systems in place to make sure we don't get there. You got to make sure that you're not taking on too much and doing too much, and you're building in that rest, building in recovery, building in the joy, but keeping those kind of like routine systems as well going.
Oh, I love that. I think that's great. That has been a cracker episode, Millie. There's so many people that talk about burnout and kids and school, and the alternatives to school aren't great in terms of homeschooling, distance. They can be really tricky. So if you really are committed to your child staying in school, having some things that you can do yourself goes such a long way. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And if you love this episode, don't worry, Millie will be back next week. We have an undetermined amount of episodes in the mini-series. So if you enjoyed it, we can keep going. And feel free to write in questions if you would like Millie to do a frequently asked question. If you'd like to do a listener question episode with Millie, I reckon that would be really good. If you are listening to this mini-series and you would love to write Millie a question, I'm going to leave in the show notes a way for you to write down listener questions for Millie. It's going to be in the show notes. Go in there, fill it out if you have questions, and I will send it to Millie, and we will either do an episode on the one topic if there's lots of questions on the one thing, or we will read out the questions and then Millie can answer. Thank you so much for your time. We are going to finish up, but we will see you next week, Millie.
Can't wait. Thanks, Jane.
The key message here is you are not alone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, follow us on Instagram or head over and join our amazing ADHD Mums podcast Facebook community. Everything you do matters and helps to spread the word about what neurodiversity in females looks like.